27. This morning we'll be looking a little bit on the signs of the times. That's my topic this morning, and which goes hand in hand with the song we just sang. Signs of the times are everywhere. And this is what we want to look at this morning. Signs of the time. I'm intending to do something very simple. And that is, I want us to look at an example of something here. And go with me to the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 16. Let me preempt what I'm about to say by saying this. Signs brings confirmation to prophecy or prediction or claim. Keep that in mind. A sign brings confirmation to prophecy or prediction or claim. Matthew chapter 16. I'm going to take the first couple of verses here, beginning in verse 1. Matthew 16, starting with verse 1. We're awake and alive, and we're going to read together. Is that reasonable? All right, let's begin. The Pharisees also, with the Sadducees, came, and tempting desired him that he would shew them a sign from where, beloved? From heaven. Keep that in mind. He answered and said unto them, continue, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. Ho, ye hypocrites! Can ye discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the signs of the times? That's a question. Next verse. A wicked and idolatrous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it, but what? The sign of the prophet Jonas. All right, I want you to think for a moment. These people were asking for a sign. But they were not just asking for any sign. They were dictating where the sign should come from. Sometimes you miss that part. They say, that's right. They say, show us a sign from heaven. Now, what did they want a sign to prove? They wanted to prove whether Jesus was who he claimed to be. And I'll prove that to you later. If you're thinking, was that really what it was about? Yes, that's what it was about. They wanted a sign from heaven because they were thinking of their forebears, how that it was Samuel who called rain and thunder from heaven. It was Moses who caused manna to fall from heaven. In their eyes, it was Moses. It was Isaiah who caused the sundial to turn backwards 10 degrees. I mean, they were thinking of these great men in their history, and how that they were able to prove certain things by signs from where, beloved? Heaven. It's interesting. Because I'm going to show you later on that the false prophet will bring a sign from heaven. Do you know that? Sure. Interesting. But Jesus says, in fact, I want to read that verse for you. In another translation. He refused them the sign, as you know. And this is what he said. He said, it's the evil and sinful people who want to see a sign as a miracle from God. But no miracle will be done to prove anything to them. The only sign will be the miracle that happened to Jonah. All right, so what was the sign of Jonah? All right, let's look at it. Same Matthew, chapter 12 now. All right, let's go to what the sign of Jonah was. Matthew 12. Let's go to verse 38. Then certain of the scribes and Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. And he answered and said unto them, same thing, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonas. Now, what is that sign? The next verse tells you. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. All right, this is interesting. He says, this is the sign that you will get. He dictated what the sign would be. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Would you think that when this sign was fulfilled, all the scribes and Pharisees would have turned to him? What's your thought?
They're still not going to believe anyway. Then the record shows it clearly afterwards. Clearly.
So something is strange. And it might be strange when you look back, but it probably will be stranger when you look here. Notice what they asked for. They asked for a sign. And Jesus says, you will not get what you're asking for. I'll tell you what you'll get. And he told them what they'd get. So I'll be thinking, if I was wanting if my faith was based on this, if I wanted to be sure that he was the Son of God before I followed him or gave my heart to him, then I'd wait to see. Because remember what a sign is. I'd wait to see if the sign comes to pass. Then when I see it, I would say, yes, he promised this is what would have happened. I mean, Moses said, if you want to be sure that the person that prophesies is a true prophet, look to see if what he prophesies comes to pass. Isn't that right?
Sure.
All right. So I would think that when Jesus came back from the dead, that all the scribes and Pharisees would have believed on him. But was that the case? As Larry said, no. The records prove it was not the case. A few did, and today a few still are turning to him from that sect. But majority did not. This is strange. Because here we're going to fast forward to our day and see what he said in relation to our day, the last days. Now, is there anybody in this room that believes we're not necessarily living in the last days? All right. And I hope I'm not pressuring you to answer that one. Because you can still believe it and not say anything, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so I wanted to go now to another passage here and see a couple of things that were said. Because remember what we're dealing with today is signs of the times. And I'm going to show you how this is important as it fits into our only hope. Because the reality is, life doesn't last forever except it's Jesus' life. That's why I can tell you, the life in me will never die. That's why I can tell you, I'll be living forever. You don't believe it? See me on the beyond. And you say, you're right, because you're still here. The life in me never ends. It's everlasting. I have it. I have it here and now as I'm standing here. And guess what? If he's in you, you have it too. You might not have known, but I'm telling you, he's there. Everlasting life never ends. And say, so are you saying you won't die? That's what I'm saying. I will never die. But I might sleep. Okay? So don't quote me wrong on that. All right, so let's go to Luke now. Luke chapter 21. Luke 21. I'm going to take a couple of verses here from Luke. And Luke 21. I want to start in verse 25, Luke 21. I'm going to take 3 verses from 21, starting in verse 25. And there, so are we there? Let's go together. I want us to be together this morning. And there shall be signs where? In the sun and and upon the earth there shall be what? Distress of nations, how? With perplexities. The sea and waves roaring. Next verse. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. All right. So I want you to note what Jesus says are some of the things that would happen. He says there shall be signs in where, beloved? In the sun. Where else? In the moon. In the stars. So there shall be signs in the heavens. There shall be signs on the earth. If you think I'm putting in what it was not said, tell me. So there shall be signs in the heavens. There shall be signs on the earth. There shall be signs in the sea. And the signs will be of such magnitude that men's heart will be failing. Heart attack. That's the point he's making. People dying from what they're seeing. Fear. Scared until they're dead. All right. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about the sun? And what's the effect of the sun on the earth? Other than keeping us warm, causing the vegetation to grow, and so on. Have you ever thought of anything else about the sun and how that affects us in any way? All right. Okay. And the moon. I just want you to think for a moment, and the stars. But I want us to. I'm going to do something, which is, well, I'll do it quickly, and so you might not even get to be bored. So I'll do it so quick, and it will pass so fast that you'll not even recognize we went there. I'm going to go to Revelation for a short while, and I know there are many people who don't like the book of Revelation. There, some water, please. So, Revelation. Let's go over to Revelation. Revelation chapter 13. I'm going to just go there quickly. And because I believe we are very familiar with Revelation, I'm just going to ask quick questions and move on. Is that reasonable? Okay. Appreciate it very much. Revelation chapter 13. That's where we're going. And I'm going to primarily focus on the last part, starting in verse 11. Revelation 13, 11 to 18. And as I said, we're not necessarily going to be reading through. But it says of this, I'm just going to make some highlights of what is said here. And see if you're together with me on that. And then we just go back to where we were, on the signs. Okay, Revelation 13 says that there's another beast that comes up out of the earth, starting in verse 11. And it describes what this beast looked like. It had horns like a lamb, and it spake like a dragon, right? Now it says something in verse 13. It says that this second beast, this second power, which I think we'll all agree. Well, let me just ask you, who is this second beast? Somebody says, all right. So we probably have two. So somebody says U.S., somebody says apostate Protestantism. But I would figure most of us are with the idea that this second beast is the political power, which is the United States of America. Isn't that right? What James said would be probably factors inside of that power, right? So if this is so, look at what it says in verse 13. It says, and he, speaking of this beast power, and whoever you say that is, and he doeth great wonders, so that what happens? He maketh fire come down from where? Heaven on the earth, in the sight of men. Now, I suppose what the scribes and Pharisees were saying, the greatest of all the prophets were able to prove that they were prophets by signs coming from heaven. And when signs comes from heaven, it tells you something that this must be of God. See, when Moses went to Pharaoh and threw his rod down, Pharaoh said, "Hey, magicians, come here." What did they do? What happened to their rods? All right. So the superiority of God was that Moses' serpents ate up the others. Is that right? But when a prophet was able to do something from the sky, it kind of made him superior, even though Pharaoh did it. Is that true? So here's something that I want you to consider. This second beast power, mentioned in 13, was able to do something. It was able to cause fire to come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. I want you to consider something else. In verse 14, it says something else. "And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by" what, beloved? "By means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast." Now consider then that a certain kind of a deception is going to sweep the world if what we're reading is correct. It's going to sweep the world, and the source of this would be miracles. With me? Signs and wonders. Right? It is this same power, according to the passage, that is going to cause a trademark to be established on the world. You know what you call it? The mark of the beast. That's what you call it. You know what it's for? Trade. It says you will not buy or sell except you have this mark or this name or this number. Read it, you'll see it. As I said, we're just browsing over. I'm not necessarily studying in Revelation. I'm just giving you a few facts from there. So this same power, and if what you're saying is correct, if it's the United States of America, then obviously it's the United States of America that's going to set certain things in motion. That will probably be followed by the rest of the world. And that is when it comes to trade, survival. Because I know, if you don't sell, John, you buy. Is that true? It's a part of living. Selling or buying, right? In fact, I don't do much selling, but I buy. And that's how we survive. Now, I'll go back to, just keep that in mind. See, it wasn't long. Just keep that in mind. Whatever is going to be happening, notice the source. That's what the Bible says. This is where it will originate. Revelation 13. Last part. Let's come back now to Luke. Were we in Luke? All right. So we're thinking about the sun and how the sun affects our planet. And how the moon affects. I mean, rarely, if ever, we learn much about the moon. I mean, I know in talking to different people, back in Jamaica, farmers use what they call the McDonald's almanac. I'm not sure if that is something that's used here in the U.S. But it's an almanac simply based on the cycle of the moon. Because, you know, the new moon and full moon and no moon affects the tidal level of the ocean, you know. And I don't know much about the details of it to explain, but I know that there are different things that happens when the moon is a certain way. And that has to do with farming. And that if you study this carefully, you can get very good crops if you plant in certain times. I also know that I've been a little bit into health work and making tinctures and so on from certain things, and that if I do certain things starting on the right time of the month, then the batch is better, right? Okay, and I don't think we need to get into that anyway. But so what about the sun? Now, somebody mentioned solar flares up front, and that's kind of a new phenomenon for most people. And they have different terms for it. There is one term that is called, what's this again? Coronal mass ejection, isn't it right? Right, which what they're basically saying is that some things are happening on the sun, and I think this is mainly based on NASA's disclosures, because we don't have these telescopes and all of this to know. So we basically listen to what others say, and so they're saying there are these disruptions, more like volcanoes taking place on the sun sometimes, and these mass of fireballs jumps off into our atmosphere and is loaded with all these electromagnetic fields and so on, and the effect of this is that when it comes into our atmosphere, it distorts our magnetic poles and shifts them sometimes, which I think science, as I'll just be saying what they're saying, says is the reason for some other things that we'll mention afterwards. The fear they're having is that if this happens, it can knock out satellites and your power plants, and all of this can take place, right? All of this is possible. Now, I don't know much about the conspiracy theory about this one, Ken, so I won't say much about that either. I'll simply just say what's on the news and what's going on. I do know that there was one man who actually changed the world in as it relates to something called global warming. And it all began with one book. Did you know that? It's called The Inconvenient Truth. It was not written by a scientist, it was written by a politician. And I've heard enough to say that the scientists were alarmed at this because they were seeing something different. The experiments that they were carrying out around the world was saying something different. They said the planet is getting cooler, not warmer. And if you've seen that documentary called Global Dimming, you'll see the research that was put together, that this is actually what is happening. Well, the horse went through the gate, so I think something had to be done to make the planet warmer. And so what we're hearing today is that we're seeing the planet warming up. Now, it has to be warming up because it was stated it would happen, right? So it must begin to warm. And the polar ice cap is melting. And the same pictures is shown for maybe 5 years in a row of a piece of ice drifting away with a polar bear to say, see, that's evidence that it's warming up. All right, so it's not happening fast enough, so we have to probably make it happen fast enough. And I think that's where geoengineering comes into it. But that also has a lot of conspiracy theory behind it, so I might not get into that too much. So what we'll deal with are things that are happening before your eyes that maybe there are things that you're not aware of, maybe because it's not things that comes on the major news casts. I found something very interesting the other day. California was experiencing drought. You know that. Terrible drought. The worst in, what did they say, 500 years? Or some figure like that. And I saw a news item where your president went to California and pledged help. Now, this might have missed you. And he said, he was going to do what he could to help California. Now, I'm thinking, now if there's drought there and you're going to help this state, what are you going to do? Truck water there? Maybe helicopters or some. How would you help a state that is in drought? Give them some money? How will that bring rain? Have you thought of that before? Anyway, 2 weeks later, they had the worst flood. 2 weeks. The worst flood in a long time. So extreme. Drought, flood. In between, I will help you. I don't know. Just something for you to think about. I'm not saying anything more than that. Okay? All right. Another thing I want you to consider then is the issue of weather warfare. Now Not many people are aware of this as well, and I'm not saying anything more than that there are just extremes in the weather, and you know that. We're seeing earthquakes like we've never seen before in our history. The magnitudes that you have never seen before in our history. Isn't that true? We're seeing rainfalls like you've never seen before. We're seeing snow like nobody has seen before. And the kind of snow, did you know that? Nucleated snow that won't melt. I have a friend up in Georgia, and he told me that what was strange, it is a norm that in the yard, they normally make a snowman when kids are there. And he said they were like out to 60 degrees, and the snowman was still in the yard, no melting of the snow. So I said something to him one day. I said, I saw something on somewhere, and it was about snow. And this person got some snow from outside, went in and tried to melt the snow. And the snow did melt, but there was no water. And he said, "What? I'm going to try it." So he did, and he called me. He said, "I've never seen that before. I melted the snow, and the snow disappeared, no water." Well, it's just another sign, right? Well, somebody says it's man interfering with the weather, and there are all these different theories about what they're doing and how they're able to do this. I don't know much about that, excepting I know in Revelation 11, the word says, "The time has come for God to destroy them that destroy the earth." That's what the Bible says. So I'm seeing a pattern that there are things happening I'm just simply letting you know what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, and then you can decide for yourself, okay? All right, let's go on some more. Now remember what it says. It says that upon the earth there is going to be distress of nations. How? With perplexity. Don't miss that part. It's not just distress of nations. It's distress of nations and they cannot fix it. That's what it means, with perplexity. To be perplexed about something is to be trying to find a solution, and you can't. And that's what the word says. There's going to be distress of nation. How? With perplexity. Now let me ask you, is that something taking place right now? It is. Nations are distressed economically, and they have no way to fix it. Well, I'm from a third world country. I'd probably know more about that than you. When it's not our prime minister that runs our country, but the people that lends the money. They make the rules, they make the law, and the prime minister is just the puppet that says what they hear. Don't you know? Just recently, our Minister of Education made an announcement. This is when you have hundreds of thousands of teachers in colleges about to graduate. And he comes and he makes an announcement. We will not employ any more teachers for the next 3 years. You don't understand what that kind of perplexity is. That doesn't happen in your country. When you're in a third world country, you understand what that means. When 96% of those students are on student loans, and we're anticipating to start working to repay that loan. And now you're being told you have no employment. What do you do for the next 3 years? That's just one. And I won't burden you with third world problems. But the word says, upon the earth, there's going to be distress of nations with perplexity. Now, all I want you to think about is this. What we're looking at today. You remember? The signs of the times. I'm going to say something to you that you've probably never thought about before. When deliverance was near for Israel in Egypt, you know what happened? Times got hard. Did you know that? You know what Pharaoh did? Pharaoh stopped supplying straws. Go back to Genesis. You can check it for yourself. He stopped supplying straws, and he says, you're going to find your own straw, and you're going to make the same amount of bricks. Now, let me ask you a question. Would that put pressure on the people? Yes. Of course it would. And God, I think, made it that way that they would want deliverance. They long for deliverance. And I think it's the same thing that will happen today, right? Well, it's just my thoughts I'm sharing. Okay, so it says, on the earth we'll have this distress of nations taking place. Now, right now, the tension that is taking place as we're speaking, even around the globe. We know of that one that the fear is this World War III, because Russia, the U.S. is going up against Russia, the bear, Russia. And they're saying, we're just waiting with bated breath. What will happen? Because you don't know. You don't know. It's just overnight. You just hear a news item tomorrow. Then you know something has happened, right? You don't know. So we have that big tension there. Then China adds to this by going to the South China Seas and starting to drill for oil. And there's all of this taking place. And the world is this way. It's in tension. Tension everywhere. Is this a sign? Is this a sign? I mean, like you've never seen before? Let's go on. We're familiar with the issue of animals dying. It has never happened on this scale before. Animals, the fishes are dying off by the billions. It's tons of fishes that are dying off. I was just looking at some news items that just happened this week of fishes dying off in Honduras, in Chile, in Tasmania. I mean, the list goes on. This happens almost on an everyday scale. Birds are falling from the sky, and there is no reason that science can give or anybody else as to why this is happening. Whales are running ashore and dying. Dolphins are dying. Sea lions are dying. I mean, consider the things that are taking place. This has never happened before. Well, this is not something known by many people. But this is happening all around. I mean, ducks, chickens. They said 20,000 ducks died in China. And what they're saying, this has to do with some avian flu or something, right? And then on that scale is the MERS virus and the Ebola virus that is there to say, we don't know, we can't contain this thing, and we don't know when it will just erupt. And just this week they said you had 2 cases of the MERS virus here in the U.S. in Florida. But are these signs? I don't know. It's for you to think. The honeybees are dying off, and they can give no real reason. Some people say it's the spraying, it's the insecticide. Some people, but the bees are dying off. And then with this comes that prediction of Einstein that says if the bees die off, then the earth cannot sustain life for more than 4 years. These are all things that are happening around us, and I just wanted to just bring them to your attention. The damaged nuclear plant in Japan has been doing some real harm to the world, unnoticed. They say at least 100,000 tons of nuclear waste are being dumped into the Pacific Ocean every day. Some people say it's as much as 300,000 tons. But what's the effect? The effect is that the fishes are having far more radioactivity in them now than there ever were before. Did you know that tuna poisoning is the number 3 cause of food poisoning in the U.S.? Interesting. So, most of our food sources is being corrupted based on genetic modifications. Genetically modifying food sources is causing diseases and problems because it was not expected. And so we're having a lot of recalls of food on the market today. Perplexity taking over. Perplexity. All right. Something I thought to be very strange. It happened when, the world was made aware of this, when that man in Florida was sleeping in his room and disappeared. It's called a sinkhole. They're appearing all over the world. Sinkholes are all over the world. Like about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I saw a news item where an entire house collapsed in a sinkhole, just disappeared. A girl was in there with a 2-week-old baby, and she felt something strange, some rumbling or rattling, and she took the baby and ran through the door, just in time to turn to see the entire house collapsed and disappeared. Why? What is happening? These things are happening all over. And I suppose this is not reported too often because we don't want men's heart to be failing them for fear. But they're real and they're taking place. Sounds are coming up out of the ground. Weird, eerie sounds. Sounds are coming from the sky. Nobody can explain. Where is this coming from? Could it be that it's all saying Earth is in its last birth pains? That Earth is about to give way to a new world order?
Why not?
And that this new world order will be the only order that will last forever. All right. So I want you to think as we look at these things, because the thing is, it's not to scare you. Is anybody afraid? I hope I'm not. Because that's the issue. The issue is, when will this happen, Lord? When will this happen that righteousness will reign forever and ever and ever and ever? When? When will it be that there'll come an end to sin and sicknesses? When will it be that there'll come an end to death? When will it be that we'll go back to what heaven intended humanity to be like? To live in perfect righteousness forever. I was saying to my kids, wouldn't it be something not to bite your tongue or to lose your step, to slip and fall? And I said, Daddy, I said, that's what it will be. There'll be no mistakes. It's all perfect. When I smile and you don't see a missing piece, Ken, it will all be there. Because this is what God intended. Look around you. We're trying to make the best of what we have. But you can see the scars that mars the planet. You can see it. Every day you can see this is what the reality is about. Do you yearn and long for something better? Well, I tell you, I do. But here is something. When I see this happening, something inside of me makes me know that God is about to do something. He's about to do something with his people. You know who that includes? Me. So he's going to do something in me. He's going to do something in me that is going to help the world. I mean, I grew up learning about what is to come. And, I know many people right now, they're waiting for certain signs. And when they see these signs and they're going to sell their stuff and they're going to head to the hills. And, just going to wait until one day they hear the day of his coming announced. And they'll just look and say, oh, we've been waiting for you. But I recognize this is not what Christianity is about. Christianity is not about saving ourselves. This is not Jerusalem. Jerusalem had to do with physical life being saved. But what we're dealing with is a spiritual battle to save people's soul. I already told you I'm living forever. I have that in me. Somebody said, how could it be that in an age with so much technology, a plane disappears? And somebody says, are you and David going to be flying with your families in one plane? So what? If my plane decides it's going to go down, what can I do? Or even if I holler and scream and yell, how does that help? If we're going to die, we're going to die. So I might as well die in peace. And I don't have to say, Lord, forgive me for all my sins. Because I know I'm forgiven. Because I'm in him. And in him I'm forgiven. So I just leave it with him and he'll take care of it. See, my life is in his hands. And anything he does with me is fine with me. But honestly, are you longing for Jesus to come? Well, I'm going to be honest. I am not. I like honesty. I'm longing for the power of God to be released on the world. Not for Jesus to come. Because if Jesus comes, what happens to 9 billion people? What happens? If Jesus comes, just be honest. Okay, so I'll be saved. I'll go home with him. Lord, this is my God. Is that what life is about? Saving myself? So it may seem strange, but that's not what I'm longing for. If I'm honest, I'm longing to see the power of God released on his people. How is that going to happen? When we know who we are and expect what we have been given. And receive that which he has already given us in Jesus. All the spiritual blessings, when we receive it, then we can go forth with power. We can walk in the town of Wenatchee. We can talk to people. And it's not just trying to convince. It's the power of God inside of you. In your words, John, that when you speak, people hear. You'll either turn away from it or your heart is drawn. Because the prophecy did say in the days of these kings, God is going to do something. And that's what it says? He's going to set up a kingdom. Hallelujah. And this kingdom is going to swell. Why? Because I'm honest when I tell you, I don't think the world generally has seen or heard the true gospel. They have heard my kind. They have heard your kind. Ken talked yesterday about the Bible studies he have had and how he's probably dealt with the Sabbath much more than dealing with Jesus. Christianity? But the good thing is we are growing. And we were stunted for a while. I had an experience, not so recently, but some time back. I planted some cabbage. And we had a drought. So they just started catching up. And for like 2 weeks, I was watering them with the city water. Just to keep them from dying. It was so dry. And strangely enough, they never moved. They just remained. They never quailed and they never grew. But they just remained. About 2 to 3 weeks later, we had a shower of rain. I was amazed. Those cabbage, after that good, big, long shower of rain, those cabbage just sprung up. How about that? Now, I like to think about my experience like that, you know. We're honest in our hearts. We're learning from others, and we don't know much. And we're doing the best we can with what we have. And, you know, we're saying, yes, brother, you know, I'm a sinner, saved by grace, and living this life, you know. And, you know, it's hard, but I'm trying. You know that kind of Christianity? Then something happens. Something happens that took away the mediator between me and Jesus. Remember now, I didn't say between me and God. Between me and Jesus. Something happened that took away the mediator. You know who those mediators were? My parents, my pastors, my teachers, respectable people. And I started hearing from him directly. And what a difference it has made in my life. Has it done the same thing to you? When you have stepped away from that and you say, Lord, I'm listening to you and I want you to teach me. And I'm going back to the word and I'm reading it a verse and a word and a phrase at a time. And I'm just growing up in him. And I did not know that I was the way I am because nobody told me. Nobody told me that I have everlasting life. Nobody told me that I had his righteousness. Nobody told me that I was a saint. And now I'm listening to him and he's telling me all of this and I'm just so blessed and encouraged by this. And I recognize the world doesn't have what I have. I recognize the church doesn't have what I have because they are still kept. A mediator, several mediators are between them and Jesus and they don't know that they're worshiping somebody that doesn't even exist. a third person and they don't know who. And so they cannot grow. And isn't this the plan of God, that the world would recognize and come to see this and experience this and be saved? Isn't that God's plan in Jesus? Isn't that the plan for the kingdom? That the kingdom would swell and the others will see the truth of the kingdom. Let me ask you, if Jesus came in this town, would there be a difference? If Jesus was living in my home where I live, if Jesus lived there, would there be a difference? So why is there not a difference now? And he's in me. And don't think I'm chastising you because I did it to me first. I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to you. I'm not making you feel bad. I'm making you see the reality that our mission and our purpose in this life is the saving of souls. That's what Jesus did. That's what he came for. And because he couldn't have done it all, he went back to his Father, was glorified, and he himself came back and filled his body, the church. And everybody that comes and becomes a part of the church receives this power of God in them. This power that first transforms them from a sinner to a saint. From one who commits sin to one who commits only righteousness. See, the issue is not your actions, it is your state. Because it's your state that produces your actions. But the signs are all around us. And I'm seeing them every day. And I'm looking for this, at this, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, I don't want Jesus to come because these people would be lost. But I realize the final work is going to be glorious. And if I don't make it to see the reality of it, then you'll all tell me about it when we all meet up there. All right? Let's just have a nice Washington meeting in one corner. Is that reasonable? Let's just go to one corner and just tell me what happened. Because I'd like to know if I don't make it to that place. See, but it's not a problem. I would like to, but if I don't, it's no problem. Because I know one thing. God's name is going to be honored. We're going to sing praise and glory because of the grace we have gotten in him. And I believe it's the heart of God to save people. I look at the crackheads and the cokeheads, and I look at the murderers, and we say, oh, he needs to be hanged, and what he did is not right. And why is he doing what he's doing? It's simply because he has not seen light. He lives in darkness, and there is no light. There's no light to lighten his life. He doesn't know better, and he does the things he does. So that's my heart, for his power to be released upon his people, that we can go forth as the people we are supposed to be, the light of the world. That we'll sit on a city that we cannot be hid, that others will know this is what we stand for. Is that reasonable? I think it is. So, here we come to this reality of the end. And Jesus says, this is interesting, he says, and when you shall see these things, can you finish it? Come to pass, then what are you supposed to do? Look up. Why? For your redemption draweth nigh. He says, when you see these things begin to come to pass, he says, then know that I am even at the door. And that's why I know, based on what is happening now, this world cannot last much too longer. And that's why I know that God's power is going to be revealed in a very short time. Amen. Now, let me tell you something else. According to the prophet Joel, when he described what we were just talking about, when he described what happened to the church and how the church was devastated by these armies that passed through, and they had no wine or oil. He said something took place. He said the ministers did something. He said they called a solemn assembly and they gathered the people together for fasting. They gathered the people together that they would come before God and cry out to God. Why? Because they recognize this is not what God intends. Notice the prayer they prayed. Spare thy people, O God, and let not thine heritage suffer reproach. Why should they say among the heathen, where is their God? Let me ask you, is that what the heathens are saying today? Where is the Christian's God? I saw something. I was disturbed at first, and I said, why am I disturbed anyway? They will launch this summer the first 80s channel out of New Jersey, I think. And rightly so. Since we can have channels with religious influences and so on, why not an 80s channel? So they'll be doing that later on. I mean that's nothing, because it will get worse until light breaks. And I like how Isaiah puts it. He says that something is going to happen. Arise and shine. You know that passage in Isaiah 60. Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of God is risen upon you. But notice when this happens. This happens at a certain time. It says it happens when darkness. You read that one? Verse 2. Darkness fills the earth. And what's the issue with the people? Gross darkness fills the people. Now let me ask you. Do you see gross darkness around you? And yet it seemed like it will still get darker. But it's this issue of seeing the darkness that is going to cause us to cry out to God. Are we crying out to God? Well, I hope that we will. And very soon. Now, I can't implore you to do this. It has to be something that you feel. If you don't see the reason for this power in your life, then you will never cry out to Him. But I'm hoping that you will. I'm hoping that He will cause you to see it. That, as John says, the angel said to him, anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you will see. Because we don't see as we should. Because we're not looking in the right direction. We're probably more self-focused than we're others-focused. That's why I think Jesus' life was such a bright light. Because it was not self-focused. It was others-focused. Because He came on a mission. And the mission was men's salvation. And He saved you so that you will become a light to others. And that they will be saved through you. All right. Well, I think we have said quite a bit there. Let's just check through and see if I got it all. And it seemed like I did. And it leads me to my last question. Who really then is king? Who is king of your life? Is it you? Or is it Jesus? Well, you can know. You can know who is king based on what is happening in your life. You can know who is king based on what you find yourself wanting more and more. And that's a good tester. What is it that you desire most? Where is your aim and your ambition? What is it that you want most in life? Look at your age. Look at where you are. What's the projection of your life? When you can see this and understand it perfectly, then you can know really who is reigning and who is king. All right? I think that if we can do that, then we can reach that place. We will reach that place where we are so perfectly in His will that we can say, all that you say, Father, I'll do. It's not just you saying it now. Wherever you lead me, I will go. Because that's where He is, on the inside, leading you into everlasting life. And that life, remember what that verse says, will be a river of living water just flowing. I'd like that experience, wouldn't you? Let's pray.